All right, everyone, welcome to this webinar, Achieving Profitability in the Cannabis Industry. I am Greg Dunaway. I am the managing partner of Maple Creek Consulting. I'm really thrilled to be here with some excellent, sharp guys in the industry that some of whom I've known for a while and some of whom have their reputation has preceded them. So a little bit about my background before I kick things off with intros for everybody else. I started off working in cultivation in Arizona. So I've had my hands dirty, was out in a grow yesterday. I then moved on to Glad, which, as you can see here, is one of those companies that does vertical farming in cannabis. We had an international reach. And now my company, Maple Creek Consulting, we help companies on the equipment side that are looking to get into Europe or vice versa, and also do marketing, communications, and PR for a lot of companies in our space. I am really, really thrilled to be here to be able to get these guys to address what has become kind of the most crucial question in all of cannabis, which is, given the market realities that we are all facing, how do we address the fact that prices are falling? There's a lot less investment right now. Dollars are hard to come by. And for those of us who are operational, how do we squeeze out efficiencies? So, with that premise, I'd love to start with a little bit of introductions for everybody. First up, Zach from Bountiful Farms. In 2 minutes, tell us a little bit about yourself and what Bountiful Farms is all about.
Absolutely. Well, first and foremost, I appreciate you, Greg. My name is Zachary Taylor. I think life is really about maximizing your opportunities, and I've been fortunate enough to have had 15 years on the commercial sector. I was one of the first 10-year-olds, one of the first 10 18-year-olds to receive my license in Colorado. So back in the caregiver model, and took that skill set with me here to Massachusetts. I've been with this company since inception. We started the build out and design in 2018. And just as kind of the full circles that is life, and Jeff and Mark were a part of that build out. So I haven't talked to those gentlemen in almost 5 years, but it's cool just how the full circle of life comes to be. So we are a 40,000 square foot facility here in Lakeville, Massachusetts, with around 20,000 square feet of canopy. And we really focus on commercial craft cannabis. We're very fortunate enough to have won back-to-back Best Grass and Mass awards. And, we really are focusing on that quantity over quality. And as you've stated, Greg, that certainly is one of the factors in this market.
Sorry about that. Jeff, go ahead and introduce yourself and a little bit about DAG so people can get to know a little bit about you.
Hi, guys. I'm Jeff Lair, the Director of Architecture and Engineering here at DAG. I've been involved in the cannabis industry for about 7-8 years now. I've worked with pretty much everyone on this panel here, so it's great to see how the whole industry comes together again. Here at DAG, I oversee all of the design, procurement, vetting of the cannabis cultivation sites. With DAG, we are a general contractor, so we build everything from produce to cannabis, the entire way through, from schematic design all the way through construction. We like to say from concept to harvest. But we are the single source of integration throughout the whole thing. We find that does speak best to finding profitability, but also the best way to build. Thank you.
Yeah. Love it. Love it. Natural pathway into Mark Doherty. Mark, let us know a little bit about what you've been up to with dual draft and a little bit about your philosophy as well.
Yeah, thanks, Greg. It's good to be here. So I started my journey in controlled environment ag back in 2010, built a 14,000 square foot indoor aquaponic farm. It was a vertical operation. We built racks. From there, segued into cannabis exclusively. Design, build, equipment procurement, systems integration. Worked for Urban Grow for a number of years. I was employee number 10 over there, and built that into a great company. And that's where I worked with Jeff and had the opportunity to work with great growers like Zach on projects like what he was talking about. And after I left Urban Grow, after working about 300 different cannabis cultivation design build projects with them, invested in and became COO of a company called Dual Draft, which when I saw Dual Draft's technology and what they'd invented, I just immediately knew it was a better mousetrap. And I immediately knew that it solved real world problems that were affecting economic efficiency of cannabis cultivators. And they do that by solving for the drainage and microclimate issues inherent in these grows. So for the last 2 years, I've been helping to build Dual Draft as a brand and a viable product for our industry.
Love it. And last but certainly not least, Mikhail, tell us a little bit about TSR, what you've been up to, and give everyone a little overview about your philosophy surrounding lighting. Oh, you're on mute, Mikhail.
I probably sound better on mute. Thanks, Greg, and appreciate being on the panelists with everyone here. Great group, and honored to be chatting. I'm president of TSRgrow. Started the company about 14 years ago, really with the aim of lighting solutions for the application and really utilizing them as a best fit. And what we've done and developed for commercial cultivation is really system solutions that integrate into the facility and help cultivation streamline the operations and take things to the next level with systems that centralize the power and bring in controls. So pleasure to be here and look forward to a great conversation.
And on that note, for all of our panelists, you guys know we're all friendly. So if you guys want to chime in on at any point on each other or build on each other's points, feel free. And for all of our attendees, if you look on the bottom, there's a little box that says Q&A. If you can throw in your written questions right there, we've got plenty queued up, but we'd love to hear from you. And there's no question that is that's off topic or anything like that. We want to help from the most sophisticated growers and investors to people who are maybe just kicking the tires on cannabis. Feel free to chime in. So with that, we will go into our first section here, which is for Zach. Zach, clearly, everything starts with the plant. And everything starts with essentially a construction plan. So a few questions to lead into our conversation today. Why should growers work with design and construction professionals to improve profitability? And how do you strike a balance between investing in advanced equipment to maintain OpEx? How do you wring out efficiencies? And what are the keys to maintaining an optimal cultivation environment in these challenging times?
Yeah, absolutely, Greg. So I think first and foremost to address your first question, I think what's imperative is that you team up with companies who have truly been vetted. And what I mean by that is, unfortunately, the fly-by-night cannabis companies, the green tax that is often affiliated with this industry has a lot of impacts in the trickle down, specifically with the operators, right? So once the sale is done by these particular companies, the checks have been written and it's up to that operator to kind of deal with this inefficient equipment. And so there's been this huge clash between the hobbyist and the commercial sector. And, so what I think the value that I can bring to this panel is, again, just talking about the timing of everything. You look at, some of the people that I looked up to and still do, and you look at Jorge Cervantes and Ed Rosenthal, and you look at the time in which it took those individuals to see 1 million plants. And then you look at the commercial sector and how quickly that's metastasized and, and how you're really kind of being thrown to the wolves in terms of, the expansion of the industry. And so, I say that because, there's a lot of great growers out there, but I think that the master grower notion oftentimes has become a misnomer. And I think that is because it's an equation. I think that as the grower, I oftentimes equivalent it to you're 33% of that equation. I really think that your genetics are a third of that, and your environment is the other part of that. And so you are an appendage to that machine. And so I really feel like, first and foremost, you need to team up with, and vet your vendors and make sure that they really have been in this space, whether it's the agricultural space, if they're just getting into the ag space, vet that they have a product that has been successful in other factors. So as an example, you look at Mikhail and you look at TSR, they've been a part of the LED. They just specifically looked at how they can maximize and how they can make those diodes and those spectrums specific for cannabis. You look at a lot of the racking companies and the same thing, they've been in doctors' offices and in retail for years. They just, kind of put a little bit more meat on their bones and put some sterility aspects in there and made them specific for cannabis. But at the end of the day, you're still vetting that company. And so, I also think it's important to, there's a big disconnect between the investors and the operators. And I think it's important to realize what portion of the game you're trying to enter. There's a plethora of ways to skin this cat, so to speak. And if your state does have, say plant count restrictions versus, doesn't, then sea of green versus, larger plants, all of those nuances kind of go into how you would, make the ideal environment. So, when I put my slides together, I really want to kind of look at, trying to be transparent about some of the industry obstacles and then some of the ways in which we can overcome those obstacles. So I am not bringing this from a CFO standpoint by any means. This is from an operator and more of a C-suite on the cultivation level. But one of the things that I wanted to bring up that I think is imperative, especially when you look at build outs and the finances and all of those things, is really how we're regulated as cannabis companies. And so I wanted to touch base on 280E. And essentially, for those of you who aren't familiar with 280E, I thought that an economist named Bo Whitney did a beautiful job of really kind of defining. It's essentially done its job. 40 years ago was implemented to make it very difficult to be profitable selling illicit drugs. And then I had our CFO take it a step further, and I felt like this was, very imperative to kind of see what if other Fortune 500 companies were taxed at the same rate as cannabis. And so our CFO did that evaluation on Pepsi, and I'd just like to share those. So Pepsi, if you look at, their year-end 2022 financial statements and assume all income was subject to U.S. taxation, then they would go from an earnings of $8.5 billion to $1.1 billion. They would pay $7.4 billion more dollars in taxes. They would jump from 21 to 90% on their federal effective tax rate, and their net income margin would drop from 10% down to 1%. And so that is a real life example of a Fortune 500 company kind of dealing with some of the struggles that we have to deal with in the cannabis sector. So trying to bring this all, forward on how this has to deal with, build outs. I really think that, it's penny wise, pound foolish to not invest in your cultivation specifically. To be able to control the supply is the key to success, in my opinion. And, although, with the tax reform, we certainly hope that happens. The market is greater than ever. And so that was one of the other things that I wanted to point out is if you look at the Gallup poll from 2022, the marijuana has now surpassed cigarettes. Now, getting away from the health disclaimers of cigarettes, what you're showing is depending on the poll in which you're seeing anywhere between 15 to 20% of the total population over 21 smokes cannabis. So there's a huge market. And, much like the beer industry and correlating there, as you see, domestic beers kind of fading out and craft beers becoming more of the, of the sought after, I think that that's going to happen with cannabis as well. But the only way you're going to be able to achieve that is to design a facility with the ability to manipulate your environment and then track and execute accordingly. And so, operational efficiencies and best manufacturing practices are key. And again, going back into that, master grower notion, there's no Space Jam. There's no secret sauce to this. I'm sure as Jeff and Mark can allude to, every building has its own personality, has its own nuances, and it takes a team effort. It truly takes, working with engineers and architects who really are skilled in their craft and professionals in their craft, and then, providing all of that and hopefully creating that symbiotic relationship for your plants. So getting into, some of the ways that I think that we can overcome these obstacles, I took a quote from, or rather I took the key takeaways from the book, The Outliers, Malcolm Gladwell. So he basically defines, and what he wanted to take away or what he wanted to find was what are the factors that contribute to high levels of success? And one of the things that he correlated was 10,000 hours. And so I think it's really important to disassociate and make sure that we all aware of the 10,000 hours of commercial versus hobbyist. Again, myself, I came from basement grows. I came from 20, 30 lighters. I have much respect for the illicit side of things. But as we get into this commercial sector, one of the analogies I often use is everyone loves to cook. But are you going to take that same recipe and those same principles and then start a catering company that serves 30 to 50,000 people? And that's really what commercial cannabis is, right? I think that everyone can grow cannabis. I think everyone should grow cannabis. It's the scalability that makes it very challenging. Again, there's no blueprint to this. And then, getting into the purpose of this phone call, you look at the evolution of the industry. When I started out in 2006, it was all HID, it was all, various spectrums, metal halide, high pressure sodiums, but they were all high intensity discharge bulbs. And in a lot of ways, in my opinion, that's an easier way to grow. When you're looking at single tier growing, it is much easier than vertical integration. But also when you look at that, there are now redefined measurements of success. When you look at back in the day, it was all about how many pounds you yielded per light. Now, when you really want to look at it, if you're looking at optimizing efficiency, you certainly don't look at pounds per light. You look at, grams per square foot and grams per watt. And when you want to look at ways of efficiencies, you don't have to change anything in terms of your yield. You simply can change and become 40% more efficient just by removing that 10,000 or that 1,050 HID bulb and putting a 750 watt LED. You automatically become 40% more efficient. Then you look at the fact that you're actually able to dim LEDs to that actual amperage and wattage accordingly. And obviously you're not going to get, an electrical sign off on that, but that's one of the, great advantages of working with advanced lighting companies such as TSR is when you dim that, you truly are dimming 50%. So you are pulling half of the amperage, half of the wattage, which then again, going back into when you really break down your grams per watt, you are really becoming that much more efficient. And, again, that's one of the greater challenges that we now face is this is a, with the amount of product that is out there, it is 100% a buyer's market. As Greg alluded to, inflation has hit the industry really hard. It doesn't cost us any less to grow this product. In fact, it costs us substantially more, but it doesn't sell for the same price, right? And so that's where I think it's incredibly important. It's the right yield now. If it was all about the old school 50 to 60, in some cases, maybe 70 grams per square foot, that is a limited batch of strains in which oftentimes now the consumer base doesn't want. It is usually a teeter-totter effect. When you look at these higher TAC, higher THC strains, oftentimes they were lower yielding strains. And so you have to kind of, figure out in terms of, where you sit in the industry of how you want to go about tackling that. But I really believe that that is the way to overcome it, is providing a robust menu, is really understanding that we're getting away from the indica sativa hybrid misnomers, and we're now really focusing on the efficacies of these plants through the primary and secondary terpenes, and really trying to provide these profiles in addition to TAC. And so I think from that, you constantly have to keep changing your menu. You constantly have to keep adapting. And that's why, and oftentimes there is the correlation where they say that head growers are often like running backs in the NFL. They call it the not for long league. I believe that, Mark was sharing with me through his, experience that oftentimes a head grower is out within 2 or 3 years. And then oftentimes they bring in another grower who gets very myopic with it and says, well, the reason that they weren't successful is because of X. And I think, again, when you look at overcoming of obstacles, it's a multifaceted equation. You have your cation exchange capacity from your medium, you have your nutrients, you have your light, but all of that has to correspond and has to work together. It's never just one facet. And so I think that oftentimes as growers, we can become myopic, but in order to become, successful and overcome all the challenges that we face, I think it's a combination of all the things I just listed.
Awesome. All right. Again, for all of our attendees, if you have a question specific to Zach, we can get to it at the end here. But with that, I want to move on to Jeff. Jeff, you've got a perspective that's super important in planning. I think a lot goes wrong in your area from some of the facilities that I've seen where people don't care about, for example, site selection, or they aren't really interested in terms of, climate or access to resources, regulatory, requirements. Talk to us a little bit about why your section, this architecture and engineering, is so crucial in determining the future success of a cultivation.
So it's definitely the biggest thing here, like you'll see on my slides here, of creating the master plan. So you have to have a whole plan in mind, as you're mentioning, before you even start anywhere. Some people just want to jump right into it, but if you don't prepare, you're preparing to fail. That the old quote on that. So one big thing that we like to do is, review of the actual site that you already have, if it's a retrofit, or even if it's a new greenfield project, meaning nothing there yet. What utilities are you with? Is it wells? Is it city water? Do you have enough power on site? Even simple as the column spacing, the ceiling heights. You need to look at all those parameters before even selecting your site to make sure that your operations will follow suit. So one big thing is creating a schematic design. Simple as that. Understanding your layouts, your equipment plans, making sure that your equipment does fit into the building and you're not just trying to cram all your equipment into a certain room. So space plan properly on all of that, as well as understand your budgets and targets. So if your budget is smaller at the beginning and you have projections to get larger, still do that master plan so you can prepare for phasing. So what's coming, how you're going to operate it, how it's going to be, and then it also helps on saving costs on construction side of things. So you have, the utility in place, you have your conduit lines lined, your tank sizing for your water storage, all that's ready for your full site to be ready, up and going. So you don't have to stop operations and then start building, continue. You want to plan the whole thing so you can have just maybe a demising wall take it down. Now you have 5 more flower rooms ready to go without stopping anything in the whole way through. So the whole thing is creating a schedule as well too. And that schedule is not just correlated with only construction, but with your entire operation. What's your fundraising tactic? What are your lead time items? What's your operation standpoint? When are you bringing your growers online? When are you bringing your, the C-suite online, the back room guys? All that stuff needs to take into account as you're doing this. And then, like I said, design with expansion in mind is a huge one. A lot of people downplay that a lot, say, I only have, a couple $1 million to start with. I know I want to get to 50,000 square feet. What do? Get the whole thing going. I can't stress planning enough on that. And then you'll see on the next slide too, is one of the big ones is once you do have that in mind, you want to design for maintenance and operational efficiencies. As Zach was alluding to, sometimes the growers are on their own island versus the C-suite on their separate island. So focus on efficient layouts based on target yields. So that means you can say the investors, I want as much canopy as possible. I know canopy equals profits, equals money, all that. But if you don't have the proper water room in place, the proper electrical room, even down to how much dry room space you guys have, cure rooms, trim rooms, everyone forgets about all that stuff as they're growing. Especially we find people bring consultants in. This guy was from Denver, so he must know everything about cannabis. We hear that a lot. So you have to look in that whole thing is, okay, maybe this person worked in the cultivation area, only the growing area, didn't work in the office area, didn't work in the shipping, receiving, or didn't know anything about the manufacturing, post-harvest, operations standpoint. So you have to bring all that into one thing and just not focus on one thing. So that's a big one of an efficient layout based on your target yields. The other one, vet all the equipment. Make sure it's all vetted already, has been through the trials and tribulations. Don't be the person who's the guinea pig in the realm of, we'll try this out, see how it goes. If that's the case and you do want to try something new, we always encourage our clients to make like an R&D room. You want to try new lights or new fans or new benching, whatever it is, try it first, make sure it works with the way you can grow and then move into it. Zach was saying, there's a big turnover rate in the cannabis industry. Whether it's, someone offers more funding somewhere, someone, started off really small, wasn't able to expand big. Now that R&D room will get them going to where they need to be. The other one I put down here is maintenance is key to a properly functioning facility because, like as I talked about in past podcasts, it's a machine that you're building here. So if you're not keeping up with that, if you're not changing, the oil in your car, it's not going to run properly. So you want to always keep everything up and running. Your facility maintenance manager, I'd say, is one of the most important people on that facility site, aside from the grower and the actual thing, because that grower won't be able to do his job if that facility is not running as it needs to be. And then the biggest one I think of all of them is a standard, an SOP, create standard operating procedures. If there is that turnover rate, people know what's going on in the industry, what's going on in this facility, how it operates, what filters need to be changed, what lights need to be changed, what's coming up next, how long for each room. If the grower wants to change it compared to a car, the car is built to go 200 miles per hour. If they always want to go 200 miles per hour but can't do it, they're going to crash every time. So they'll understand exactly how they can do it, what it's meant to do, and go from there. As you're designing for expansions, we talked about the last one, maybe you don't fill it out or outsource it with all your efficiencies and all the equipment where you can change that up, but at least you have your design in mind for your SOPs to keep matching. And then big one is, just tying it all together is get someone like, ourselves is a quick plug, but someone who can plan, design, and build for the idea that you're under one umbrella the entire time. So you're not stopping and starting. Go into the consultant, they do the schematic plan. Like I said, say they missed something. Then you go to an architect engineer, they design it. Maybe they've never built a site or even seen a site, but they know, hey, if I put it on paper, it's going to get built that way. And then just a separate construction team who doesn't understand what they're building. All you're going to do is add timelines, add delays, add cost, add change orders. And this whole panel is about, keeping profitability, making profitability this thing. So if your CapEx is there, then your OpEx will follow. So, plan ahead. That's the biggest thing I can pretty much say for all this stuff, but overlay all your aspects, operations, design, head house suite, growers, make sure everyone is talking together and doing their thing. Just another big one on here is on the planning side is early procurement. Some people don't realize lead times on a lot of the stuff here. They'll say, oh, I know my benching is, 12 weeks out or a tank's 3 weeks out. But in the big picture is you want to get growing, you want to do all this. How long is your switchgear out? Sometimes it's a year and a half out. Oh, I'm on well water. Hey, did you test any of the wells yet? Did you dig? Did you do any of the geotechnical studies? So you have to make sure everything is in place before you get to that final goal. So like the big thing is that just plan, design, build, keep it all under one umbrella. But the big thing is plan, and then with proper planning, you'll see that profitability come.
Love it, Jeff. I have to comment on one thing you said because it happened yesterday. I was down in a grow in Arizona, and we were talking with some dispensaries who visited the grow. You talked about maintenance. One tour facility that dispensary tripled their initial order because they came through the tour and said, we see that, not just your first 3 aisles, your back aisles are clean. We know that you guys are doing it right. And it was truly one of those moments where it's a holy shit moment, saying, seeing an order get tripled like that. I love that you said that the maintenance was so important on these grows. Moving into Mikhail, lighting is crucial. We already have a Q&A for you, or a question that I'll ask you towards the end of your presentation regarding spectrums. What criteria do you use to kind of select equipment for specific growers that come to you and lean on you? We have some international guests on this webinar, and I believe that that they're looking to us for answers about what is a best practice here. So how do you do that? And what sort of data do you believe is crucial for lighting systems to collect for growers, so they can improve outcomes for their plants, and ultimately the purpose of this whole webinar, profits?
Thanks, Greg. It was one of the things that really is crucial to I think Zach touched upon it, Jeff, on all of these things, is thinking about things super early. We don't sell lights, we sell solutions. And part of that is really getting involved early. It's important to make sure in the whole facility, and Jeff touched upon it very well, is no silos. When you're thinking and planning of a facility and going through everything, you want to make sure that everything is thought up front in the design of the facility, whether it's lighting, the HVAC, the dehumidification, fertigation, the nutrients, the monitoring, the environment, the control, the building management. All of these have to talk to each other. And so often and not, lighting and other things are thought of last, or, I can put that off, or I can, it's not as important. But thinking about in today's age, where you're moving into food and medical manufacturing, regulations, and all these things are going to come together. It's so critical that all of the systems talk. So any of the equipment that is put together and brought in, it's so important that they actually have a very capable way of integrating things together. And that, ties in a little bit with lighting in a major way. Lighting, where photons and light energy is such a huge part of the facility. I mean, it consumes between HVAC and lighting, you're at 80% of your energy consumption. And so it's really crucial that you think about lighting early, and how that's going to play a role, and how it's going to integrate into all of the other features and facets of the facility, from, especially into the BMS system, and being able to monitor microclimates and really integrate things together. So that's a crucial piece. No silos, and thinking about lighting early, and then really bringing in controls, and making sure all the controls and all the integration ties all of those pieces together. That's the first step to really thinking about equipment and facility and really making a difference. Next slide, Gail. So talking about controls, bringing all of those things together, the lighting, the environmental monitoring, the HVAC, the fertigation, data-driven efficiencies are going to really help reduce your energy consumption and drive your yields. Bringing all of these things together, process plants, from maintenance, seed to sale, all of these things have to be integrated and documented together. You want to be able to make analytics and take analysis of everything that you're doing, so that you can grow consistent product over and over and over again, so that you have data that drives your success, that drives your decisions on what to grow, how to grow, what maybe not to grow next time, or changes that need to be made. You're really, a lot of, you're talking about craft growing, or even, commercial cultivation or growing medicine. we're dealing with a lot of, customers in Europe where, when you register a strain or you're registering something that has to be produced and the same way very consistently, it's critically important that you're able to control it, monitor it, maintain it, and grow it the same way over and over again, so that that medicine, when it's delivered, has the same effect and has the same consistency and has the same, profile, TAC, and, attributes that you want to deliver the medicine for a patient. Next slide. So, to help achieve this, one of the ways is to, think about, how can you bring this in together to be able to do that. And one of that is through, really full zone control, full control, advanced recipes of an advanced scheduling of the lighting system. So a lot of times when you're getting into cultivation, you're growing, maybe through, whether it's 3 strains or 5 or 10, being able to run through that, and being able to control all of the lights and have that tied into the building management system, tied into the environment, and be able to adjust and adapt that to microclimates that are in the room. That's a game changer for, in a commercial cultivation scale. Being able to have zones of, have a certain strain that you're running in a certain area under certain lights, under certain conditions, and being able to define what that light intensity and control should be for what's being grown. And then in another section or area of the room or facility, being able to do that specifically for that strain, and then being able to profile it repeatedly the next time you grow it. And if you then on your next run or cycle, you bring in different strains, be able to reconfigure the lighting and the zones centrally for growing that particular strain again in a new way, so that you can then introduce another recipe and be able to control everything very granularly for what you're doing, so that you can adaptively adjust exactly what you need and what the photons you want to be delivered to the plants. But being able to efficiently manage your photons, tie that to the environment that's being, whether it's microclimates or other environments in the room, tie that to the fertigation specifically for that strain. That's how you're going to increase your yields at the lowest cost per, whether it's per gram or, per square foot, and, per watt, however it's being measured. Next slide. Next slide, yeah. So master recipes is the way to do it. So if you're thinking about, we all want to then, we talk about it in terms of master recipes. So master recipes is how you can now optimize exactly what you want to do. This is where we're all going for consistency and batch manufacturing. For again, going back to food and medicine, this is what we're producing. Yes, it can be recreational, but even when we talk about craft brews and what they grow, or going to find they have a recipe that they run under certain conditions, under certain ways. And they want to, when they run it again, they want to be able to run it and repeat it. And this is what's key to really integration into the facility. Master recipes, infinite zones, integrating from seed to sale. If you know exactly which strains, which are tagged, which are under which particular lights, you can define the light levels. You can define the feed schedule. You can then know the environment that's around the plants that's being grown, because you're measuring that. You can bring that all together. You can now measure KPIs, know the yields, the quality, and how that was received, how that grew in terms of operational costs and what went into growing it, and then translate that from the sale on the end product. You can start to see what your efficiencies are, to start to really monitor and maintain from batch to batch, grow to grow, strain to strain, and really optimize exactly what you're doing. I mean, when we're talking about being efficient and being and making money at what we're doing, this is a critical piece. We talk about trying to be profitable. You have all these challenges. You've got competition, you've got regulations, you've got 280E. You need to be as efficient as you can in growing the crop and the strain that you're growing at the lowest possible operating costs. And in order to do that, you need to know what the information that's going in, how much energy, what light levels, the fertigation, and you need to know then what comes out so that you can really come back and see if that made sense to do it. And maybe it doesn't make sense. Maybe you need to change things up or look at some other optimizations. But the whole key is to take everything to the next level and be able to drive it and grow it at the lowest operating cost. Next slide. Looks like we're missing a couple words here, but how do we do that? And the key here is to ditch the driver. The remote driver technology is really the key to being able to monitor everything, control everything, and run everything in a way with master recipes and strain control. So remote driver technology, removing the drivers off the fixtures, it's a major failure point. Drivers don't have any data. You've got to run dimming wires to everyone. So by centrally locating all of the drivers outside of the grow areas, you can integrate power and dimming on the same line. You can eliminate all contactor panels and relays. You can now introduce controls and applications that drive crop steering and through lighting. People talk about crop steering through fertigation and monitoring the nutrient levels and the EC and adjusting things based on drybacks. Nobody ever talks about the ability to adjust the light levels based on either a microclimate or a strain that's being grown. You talk about trying to achieve the highest efficiencies. That's the way to do it. So now you can control exactly how much light is being delivered to that particular strain based on what's being produced. But you now have the ability to collect that data. You have the ability to change it, adjust it on the fly. So when you start to talk about good manufacturing practices and agricultural practices, these are the keys to success. Significant savings on installation. So again, costs to build a facility, 50% savings on installations, huge savings over in energy reduction by using centralized power and being able to optimize and specifically control the amount of photons that are being delivered to the plant. You can have 15, even more higher percentages savings over having local drivers in the room, because again, your HVAC is working based on the photons that are being delivered and not specifically on having extra wattage in there or just running the room at an average temperature. So again, maximizing yields, minimizing your operating costs. Centralized power servers are the way to go. And our new slogan is really ditch the driver. I mean, that's this is how you integrate into the facility. Full BMS integrations, whether it's BACnet IP or other protocols, we can now bring all the controls all integrated fully together so that you have a full picture, in one dashboard of what you're doing to optimize everything. So last slide, Kim.
All right, 1 minute, Mikhail, wrap it up.
So just real quick, this is just a quick overview, but you can see that remote power over local drivers, significant savings and increases in yield, reduction in energy, and just significant advantages along the way. So I want to thank you and appreciate it.
Yeah, that was great. We have some really good questions coming in for the Q&A. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Mark, and then there's questions that all the panelists can answer, I think, from different perspectives. So just everyone in the Q&A know I've seen your questions and we will get to them. So with that, Mark, you and I have a kind of a shared background in the racking world. One of the things that always crops up, and I'm so glad you're going to address this, is if your HVAC is poor, if your environment is poor and multi-tier, you will have poor results. So, one of the things I'd love for you to address is, why is climate control so challenging? And what are some reasons, energy use from HVAC systems is going to be, overclocked? And, once these facilities are up and running, what can happen for an HVAC, to be upgraded, to get better SOPs, and frankly, the point of this whole thing, how do we reduce operating costs from energy use? So with that, off to you.
Yeah, great. Well, thanks, Greg. As I'm sitting here listening to Zach and Jeff and then Mikhail, one of the things that I'm thinking is I hope that people who are joining us today for this webinar get the takeaway of the need for holistic integration to be successful in these projects. Holistic integration of planning, holistic integration of design and construction, holistic integration of operations. And realistically, to be successful, whether you're, like Jeff mentioned, you're a greenfield project, building a new grow, getting going in a new market, or whether you're taking over an existing facility or any of the above, having that one person within your organization that really values cultivation and understands it, but they're not the master grower, right? They're more on the ops side. They also value and understand the construction piece. They value and understand the ops side. They value and understand the human capital, right? That's what's missing today. That's what's missing in the majority of these projects. And folks that can get that piece right, I think will find themselves more successful. So I hope that's a takeaway. At any rate, back up just a quick second for me to the previous slide. So when I was asked to weigh in on this portion, this environmental portion of our discussion today, I happened to be on Instagram that same day, and I saw this this post from Brian Gabriel at Gabriel Cannabis in Washington State. And I don't know Brian. I follow him because he puts out good vibes, and he's got rooms full of just great looking flower, and he grows big rooms. And I love big rooms full of good looking flower. So he says in his post, I've seen top quality cannabis grown with a variety of different lights, nutrients, and mediums. I've never seen top quality cannabis grown in I believe it says subpar environment or a weak environment. And, he goes on to say that environment is key. Environment, in his opinion, is the number one thing for successfully cultivating cannabis in a CEA or controlled environment ag facility. 10 years ago, I was starting my presentations with, if you can't control your environment, you can't predict your outcome. So the point is, how are we still talking about this 10 years in? Right? It's somewhat crazy to me. It's kind of like somebody posting on Instagram that they just switched away from T5s for veg, which if any growers are on the call, they know what I'm talking about, right? It's like, hey, it's just crazy that we're still talking about this. So why is it that this is still the point of conversation, and really the bane of existence for a lot of cultivators, and I would argue for a lot of operators, investors, C-suite that are failing because of environmental issues within their grow. Next slide, please. So when we look at it, why is climate control so challenging for indoor grow operations? The top thing that I've seen for over 13 years building indoor cultivation facilities is this behavior of sacrificing operational expenses for capital expenses. Meaning when they're in the design build phase, there are decisions being made that are purely on what something costs, a piece of machinery, equipment, a behavior, and the cost of CapEx, and they're not taking into account how much it's going to cost to operate the facility. And Zach, who's a grower in a highly competitive market, who's been growing, and trust me, I've been there, I've seen what Zach is growing. It is as good as everybody says. And the thing is that he said it. It's not getting cheaper for us to grow the product. It is getting cheaper for people to buy the product, right? And so as we see that price compression plus inflation, the operating expense is what's crippling, the operating expense of these facilities. So if we're making these, they call it value engineering, but really it's discount engineering that starts to happen in the towards the end of these projects, because a lot of times they're out of money and they're out of time. And so we see decisions made in that light that will harm the environmentals going forward, and therefore the operating expense, and therefore the profitability of the operation. Another big thing that we used to see quite frequently was MEPs, or mechanical, electrical, plumbing engineers, that just simply didn't understand what they were getting involved with. They were great at comfort cooling for human beings. They'd, done big deals, casinos, hospitals, what have you. But then it comes to plants and lights and transpiration and irrigation, and they didn't know how to calculate the sensible and latent loading numbers properly. And so we saw a lot of that. Another thing is, and in all fairness, some of these MEPs were just given the wrong information, right? So they go to a grower who, the grower was hired because they're excellent at growing the plant. They then become a de facto project manager oftentimes in these, in these projects. And they're asked by the engineer, hey, what are your set points in your rooms? And the grower says, well, I'm going to run my flower at 78 degrees and 50% relative humidity. What they fail to tell the MEP is that for the last week or whatever out of the cycle, they're going to try to plunge the temperature and the humidity down simultaneously because that's how they grow, right? And whether that works, doesn't work, I'm not here to debate that. What I'm saying is that mechanical systems aren't designed to operate in that capacity. And so they're going to start to really stress those systems. They're going to start to see failures. And we see it, all the time where information just isn't transferred well. There's a lack of proper commissioning. And this is something that when Jeff and I were both with Urban Grow, Jeff was in charge of all our commissioning of all systems. I was managing ops for the company, and we would, be trying to get a team out to commission systems. And what is commissioning, right? So when we put in HVAC systems, when we put in fans and lights and all these different mechanical systems that all have to play nice together, we want to turn them on. We want to have a representative of those companies turn them on for the first time and put them through their paces and stress test them and make sure that they're installed properly, they're communicating properly, they're functioning properly, and fire that facility up using commissioning. Oftentimes, again, because there's this race to get plants in the building, to get revenue generating for these projects that, quite honestly, and this is something I'll probably talk about more in a minute, a new design build from concept to operational, 12 to 18 months, right? That is what we all see, as much as it gets argued, that's true. And so, there's this race at the end, right? Because we're out of time, we're out of money, we got to get plants, we got to get revenue, we got to stop, spending. And so, overlooking commissioning is a serious issue. Another big one, and Zach talked about this because we were joking the other day, Zach and I were talking, and we were saying that Zach's he's a unicorn, right? In the industry, he's been in his position and grown in his position over the years of working with the company there in Massachusetts. And so often as equipment providers, design engineers, builders that are brought in, at that month 0 or month 1, and, we're introduced to a grower usually early days in the project before there's a building even. And that grower is very rarely there after the second harvest. And that is because, in my opinion, a lot of times they're set up for failure, right? There are agreements made, there are promises made around, I can grow 65 grams a square foot, I can grow 95 grams a square, whatever's thrown out there, right? And then they don't hit the mark. And a lot of times the cards are stacked against them because there wasn't this holistic integration process of the 1,000 parts and pieces and the 1,000 variables that we encounter when growing this plant and doing it in the way that we do it today, where we're pumping a lot of light, a lot of CO2, high EC, irrigation strategies, things like that. So, changing the grower, when the grower that came in and said, I grow in 2-gallon pots of coir or soil or perlite mix, whatever. And then the new grower comes in and says, oh no, the reason why they weren't successful is because they need to grow in 6x6 Rockwell blocks. And because we need to run the rooms at different set points. And oh, by the way, let's get different lights in here, right? When that stuff starts happening, we really see attacks on the infrastructure, especially on the environmental control infrastructure. Next slide, please. So, we see where facilities, and we kind of have this interesting, new paradigm that we're in the industry, where we have facilities that were built 5, 6, 7, 8+ years ago that are still in operation, that are becoming highly inefficient. And so some of those, folks are walking away from. Here in Colorado, where I'm located, we see folks that are just turning lights off because it's no longer economically viable to turn them on. And then we see other companies that hold these assets that are looking to sell them. And so we're seeing a transference of certain assets as well, where people are moving in as new owners to an existing operation. And so, we might look at that and say, well, is our HVAC system, are we using an unnecessary amount of energy? And, the number one thing, it's been talked about already, is a lack of maintenance, right? And Jeff, it was an excellent point. second to, the grower who's leading the charge on making sure that, the plants are beautiful and healthy and happy, which is your product and which is your revenue. That maintenance supervisor, technician on site. And again, it depends on the size of the grow, right? If you're running 5,000 square feet of canopy, do you need a full-time maintenance tech? Probably not. If you're running 50,000 square feet of canopy, you're a fool not to have one. And so, that maintenance is so key to our HVAC system. When filters aren't getting changed and that gunk is getting up into the rest of the system and affecting the, fans and motor speeds and switches and all of that stuff, and just not doing that regular maintenance on the HVAC systems is really, the first place to start. Secondary to that, right, the age of the systems. I've walked into facilities very recently that I walked into one the other day, in Illinois. It was built and turned on 7 years ago. All that equipment is 7 years old. It's been running 24/7 and it's starting to fail. And typically for these bigger HVAC systems, 15 plus years is what you should get out of them. But we are working them really, really hard. And so especially in facilities that used, sort of off the shelf systems that are actually built for comfort cooling in office buildings and not for, the equivalent of merging a data center with an indoor pool, which is what we do with indoor growing, right? Think about that. It's a data center requirements and indoor pool requirements in one space. And then we strap some mechanical systems to that. So, the age of the systems is critical when we're looking at these facilities. I'll tell you the big thing right now, right? And it's not just because TSR is our host. If you're still running HPS, and like Zach said, HID, which HID sort of encompasses HPS and CMH and a bunch of other lighting types. But if you're still running HID, particularly HPS lighting in your grow, call an LED company like TSR and ask them about getting rebates. Here in Colorado, where I am, we've got grows that are getting 100% rebated, right? Or grows that are getting $250,000 worth of new LEDs for like the cost of the tax. The savings is insane. And the positive impact that it's going to have on the ability to control the environment, right? Which is the number one thing is just dramatic. And so, to anybody out there holding back on accessing those rebates, I'm telling you, it's pennies from heaven right now. It is one of the most beautiful things and the biggest, leg up that I think our industry has. And there's many states that are offering rebates, and there's great people out there to help you with that. Another big one is improper airflow, and that's where dual draft plays, and that's where dual draft came in. When I built my first grow, I told you back in 2010, we operated from 2010 to 2013. We were a double stacked facility. And with that, we had issues with microclimates. We had issues with airflow. We could not homogenize the environment. And moreover, now, when I walk into our facilities that are designed accurately, right? The MEP knew what they were doing. They got the right information. They spec'd the equipment properly, but they're unable to homogenize the air within the space. And this is really, really critical and particular to vertical farming as well, right? When we start racking and stacking in rooms and creating false floors and barricades. Another one to really look at is sensor placement. Where's the sensor or the switch on the wall that turns the system on and off? Like I said, the other day I was in that older grow and they had the sensor right by the front door of the grow rooms. And so every time you opened and shut that grow room door, it was telling the HVAC system to do something erroneously. Next slide, please. And so, a big one here, big elephant in the room. How can HVAC systems be upgraded to improve? Right now, I would argue, who the hell can afford to upgrade their HVAC system, right? If people are balking at paying the tax on a full rebate LED swap, just the tax, like 10, 15K, do they really have hundreds of thousands to spend on an HVAC system? I would start with, a room assessment. We go to our website, and I might be able to have Gail share this with the attendees today. But if you go to our website, dualdraft.ag, dualdraft.ag, and click into, you can find an environmental Kaizen, we call it. And so that Kaizen approach is that step-by-step process to analyzing and understanding what is going on in this space and then developing solutions to it. I think all too often we walk into a problem and immediately want to say, well, here's how you solve it. Let's just add more dehumidifiers to this space because it's too humid. Walking through a prescribed process, I think, is advisable prior to deciding what you think the answer is. Understanding the original specifications of the system, I think, is critical. If it was originally spec'd to run at 78 and 50 and you're trying to drive it some other way, probably not going to work out well. So understanding what was the building or system originally spec'd for, asking the humans what's going on. I think this is the biggest thing, right? I was in a facility one time walking through with the master grower, and I said to her, do you have environmental control issues? Do you have microclimates in these rooms we're walking through? And she said, yeah, we do. But, you know, I just moved the genetics around, and sometimes that works and sometimes it doesn't. The reality is that there is no way in a brand new $25 million grow that the CFO of that company knows that the growers are using workarounds because they have mechanical deficiencies. Think about that. We would never allow that in any other industry. So really talking to people, the people are going to be the best source of information in the grow. And then just to close it out, a lot of what's been discussed, right? How do we improve how these systems operate? You know, take Jeff's advice, take Zach's advice, take Mikhail's advice, you know, take the advice that's been given in my portion of the presentation, implement that, and overall holistic integration is really key. So thanks for your time today.
Perfect. All right. With our remaining minutes here, we're going to go directly to the questions that have been asked. I will start with Carl Jackson's question he asked first. So I guess this would kind of go to Zach and Mikhail. Probably we'll start with you, Mikhail. Are there any spectrum changes when dimming LEDs?
Great question. So if it's a fixed spectrum, you know, LEDs are constant current. When you're powering an LED source, the LEDs themselves are DC driven, and there's they're operating at a certain voltage. And when you provide direct current to them, they'll light up as you dim that current, which is how you dim an LED lighting fixture. If you're talking about a fixed spectrum, as you dim that current, the forward voltages should stay fairly constant, and your spectrum should adjust and be very consistent throughout the dimming range. You may see minor shifts here or there, but generally each LED is going to shift slightly in unison, and therefore overall be very consistent. Otherwise on if you're doing spectrum changes, to me that's a challenge on commercial cultivation, because you're introducing a lot of variables for people to change things. And then obviously as you dim and change the spectrum, then yes, the spectrum will change.
Yeah, so just to add to that, as Mikhail was talking about, kind of crop steering through lighting, some of the ways in which we do that at my facility is, we implement a sunrise, sunset. And so we're allowing the lights to build up to that par value. And then same thing as they go to sleep. Again, as Mikhail talked about, TSR, they're solution oriented. So you pick how many, so we have, 5 bar, 750 watt, 150 watt, each bar, but you can kind of plug and play and create your own module. And then from that also, you can pick a light that has more far red spectrum, as well as something that has more of a full white spectrum. And I found strains, across the board, some may prefer others. What we found in our R&D room, as Mark pointed to, so we do research and development on a plethora of different things. And one of the things we're working with Mikhail on right now is kind of seeing how that far red affects certain strains. And we've seen a great increase in our yield to rosin using more of a far red spectrum.
Love it. Love it. And rosin is absolutely, you're looking for a product that's going to hold a higher price tier and value. Rosin is the way to go. Next question. I'm going to change this one because I just have to. Homie culture, a guy who knows a guy. Jeff, this one's going to tee it up for you. They said, do you think it's a risky approach when a cultivator says they know a guy talking about a GC or architect? I'm going to go ahead and say that we all know that's a risky approach. Tell us why the kind of homie culture of I know a guy who knows a guy is a horrible idea for architecture and engineering.
Yeah, I'd say it's our biggest competitor or rival, really, when we get that answer. Biggest thing is it's such a specialized industry that we're in right now. Like I said, if you have a builder just building off of plans, sure, they can do that. But once you get into that specialty thing of, airflow movement, as Mark said, sensor placement, a lot of people just say, this is how you wire up a sensor. Where does that sensor get placed? where should these fans get mounted? A lot of people might see a room and say, hey, all I have left is just benching fans and lights. That's it. There's so much more to it. All the commissioning aspects of it, make sure it works properly. And then also just making sure you're not forgetting just the proper rooms. You mentioned architect. So some people might say, as Mark said, like, they're conditioning for environment or just a human office there, but say they do know the exact conditions that they need to make. Are they overseeing the entire process? Do they know that they have, you know, the spacing correct for the flower rooms versus bedrooms? They have 15 to 20% on that. One thing we incorporate a lot is like a potting room. Some people forget the storage, some basic things like that are such essential to the cultivation and operation efficiency that you need someone who knows what they're doing, who's been in the industry before, and can learn from past people. We've had some people, we met at a trade show recently, they built their first phase and we said, hey, why aren't you building your second one? They said, we don't want to do it. That was ridiculous. They, you know, something that they didn't realize what the hurdle that they're coming into. So that's why you should always go with someone who's experienced in the industry.
Yeah, I could have said it better myself. So another question, this was interesting. I'm not sure if maybe this is for Zach or for Mikhail directly. It's from Timothy Johnston. Are there results yet from under canopy lighting testing? Is that something one of you two wants to address?
I'll go first in terms of in general, we found that under canopy lighting is a potential solution to look at. What we have found is a lot of times in cultivation, especially with HPS grows, the fixtures are actually way too far away from the plants, and the amount of intensity and light levels that you're getting are low, not for any other reason than the fixtures were hung in one specific area in the very beginning, and then they were just left there. And so the intensity isn't quite there. So when you come in and you relight something and you switch from HPS to LED, it's a whole different, you know, you get brighter light, you get better light and higher intensities. And naturally, you're going to reduce energy when you switch out from HPS to LED. You're going to reduce energy, but at that lower energy, you should be able to get enough PPFD to grow the plants the way you want them. And when we relamp an area or do a lighting design, we specify the position of the lighting levels. And we find that many times when we relight an area from HPS, sometimes we're even doubling the light, mostly because the original lights were so high. So when people look at intercanopy lighting, a lot of the times they're putting intercanopy lighting in and testing with it and getting great results from it. But it's because the lighting that they're getting from the intercanopy lighting is actually being delivered to the plants, and really that light could have been delivered from the light above, but the light was so far away that with the inverse square law, it just never got there.
Gotcha. A few more questions here. I know we're at the top of the hour, but we still got a lot of people hanging out with us. So, one that's interesting, I think, Zach, you can probably address this one because it happens all the time. But what are the impacts of different genetics being brought in, 6, 12, 18 months into your operation? What are the considerations you should be thinking about?
Sure. Well, long-winded question or long-winded answer. I'll try to make short. Again, cleanliness is key, right? So when you look at good manufacturing practices, when you're bringing in a lot of these genetics, I personally would never bring a clone in. When you look at hop latent is real. It is, obviously that comes through seeds as well. But bringing in new genetics is something that you have to do as a grower, but how you go about that and how you vet that, I think, is key. So everybody says their grow is clean until it's not, right? It's kind of the old Mike Tyson, everyone has a plan until they're punched in the face, right? So I think it's important to take in new genetics, but when you're looking at new genetics, I think it's important to ask the question, why? And so a lot of times, you bring in these hype strains of these gelato crosses and, you certainly have to do that. But I think you need to check multiple boxes, kind of going back into the robust menu. And also, understanding that this is a copycat league. And so you have to kind of adhere to what the public wants. I've used the analogy of, oftentimes when you were a kid and you traveled to another state and you would hear a song on the radio, and based upon whether or not that was in your region or not, you may or may have not heard that song before. It's similar to that. So I think it's important to bring in genetics, but the thing that I would give the best advice to is always have that quarantine room, particularly if you are going to take that risk and bring in clones and genetics from somebody else. You need to make sure that that genetic is quarantined from the rest of your garden until you feel that that is vetted and clean. There's a plethora of ways to go about that. There are testing facilities that do test for hop latent and other viroids. But yeah, it's cleanliness is key there, would be my advice.
Yeah, I could have said it better. You know, cleanliness and key just in general, right? We know this is an interesting question from Timothy Johnson. And I think we'll open it up. Maybe we'll start with Mark on this one, and Jeff as well chime in. You know, are you guys seeing more personal micro grows in states with full rec? And then also, you know, if you're doing a smaller grow room, are those clients able to be serviced, you know, with architecture, engineering, design, and then even your product as well, Mark, you know, with racking, or do we need to be up at commercial scale for kind of your services to kick in?
Yeah, so I think it depends on what you define as a commercial scale, right? I mean, we've got projects right now, we're seeing a lot of 3,000, 5,000 square foot canopy projects in fairly saturated markets like California. Whereas we're seeing in the more open and newer markets, 15,000 minimum square feet of canopy. And so I think at the end of the day, right, when you're looking at efficiency of production, you can gain efficiency if you're a very small canopy and it's only a couple of, it's like a tight crew working it, right? And so you've got a crew of 2 or 3 people that are doing the work of 6 people, then, you know, but getting paid like 2 or 3 people or taking profits like them, then you can gain efficiency that way. At some point, though, I don't think you really can compete until you're 10, 15,000 square feet of canopy and above, right? So if you look at a new market like New York, where they're going to sort of open the floodgates to all these different cultivation size licenses, I really think people even, and what I like to look at is what I call craft at scale, which is what Zach is doing, which is what Zach was talking about earlier, right? Is this idea that we can produce a really high-end product that's really clean and really, you know, grown really efficiently, and we can do it with that love and passion. And because, you know, our days are spent more with the plant than managing the systems, that's one of the ways I encourage my clients to get there. But, you know, with that being said, it's all about what's it cost you to produce a gram. It really comes down to that, right? What's it cost you to produce a gram? And at the end of the day, that's how you stay competitive in the market. Now, I will say, the other day I was talking to a friend of mine here in Colorado that was running a small, like a boutique grow, and he said that even though, and his flower looked great, he said that even though his flower looked great, he had the right genetics, everything was going well, because he didn't have the name brand recognition, he couldn't get the price per pound that he needed to get. So, you know, some of the more well-known growers here in Colorado, there's like 6 or so that really have wholesale pretty well locked down with name brand recognition. And if they've got the right genetics, they might get $2,000 a pound for it, right? But if you don't have that, or if you don't have the right genetics, or if your flower just doesn't look that great, you're like in that 5 to 7 range. And so, you know, it really comes down to efficiency, but then also looking at these different markets, what's the opportunity for that entry point, and where's the product going to go?
Yeah, and Jeff, same question over to you. You know, for guys that want to maybe get into the craft, I just toured yesterday. I was touring a craft cannabis facility, right? You know, and actually, Mark, one interesting thing was the way that they were successful was identifying that in Arizona, for example, there was a lack of high quality cultivars being grown in that craft model, and then leveraging relationships, right? You don't have the relationship to dispose, you're going to be in trouble. But Jeff, I don't want to get too distracted. You know, what about you from your end? Do you guys service these smaller grows? Are you seeing, as a reaction to the macro trends, that there are more smaller grows going up?
Definitely, I think not only on the older states you kind of see it, but I'd say on the newer states coming lines, like New Jersey is probably the biggest one. New Jersey, New York are these micro grows coming online because they do allow for a full cultivation after that. Yeah, we'll talk to anyone on stuff. Obviously, everyone has to start somewhere. Design services, it is key, as you said, making the reputation, making the connections in the industry. You look at every single large company, you see a picture of a garage. Hey, this is where we started. So, you know, they're going to go somewhere possibly, but it's always helpful to, you know, just take advice, take the services, or at least hear them out, see where people are going. And then, you know, it's like I said, it's a community that we're in here. So we're trying to do that. If people do anything, just a quick plug for us, but dagfacilities.com, you can sign up for our services there too, for a launch plan.
Awesome. We have one last question. It's a good one from Sam Milton. It's very specific. Zach and Mikhail, I think you guys are going to be the ones who can answer this. Are you guys aware of cultivars that grow especially well under lower light conditions?
Zach, take it away.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, as Mark's kind of alluded to, we're passionate, in what we do. We do a pheno hunt every year, and an extensive one at that. We're going through 4,000 plus seeds. So the short of it is OGs do not like light. When you look at the relationship to the equator, and you have, your high pinene, limonene, more of your sativa leaning, your Durbans, so to speak, they love the high pars, right? When you get into some of your biker cushes, your OGs, that some of the times I feel like they grow better under the table.
Well, there you go. We've gone a little bit over, everyone. I want to thank all of our attendees. I want to thank our panelists. Going real quick: Mikhail Sagal, president of TSRgrow; Jeff Lair, the director of architecture and engineering at DAG CEA Facilities; Mark Doherty, the COO of Dual Draft; and Zach Taylor, the GM of cultivation of Bountiful Farms. Thank you guys so much. It was a wonderful session. My name is Greg Dunaway. I'm the managing partner at Maple Creek Consulting. And again, thank you guys for the great questions and the great information.
Thank you, Greg, for being a moderator, and appreciate everybody for getting on the panel and chatting. It's been awesome.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, guys.